podcast where we test everything so that we can hold fast to what is good and abstain from what is evil.
Maybe you guys are seeing a lot of this where people are saying that this is a judgment coming from God. This is a discipline from God. What would you gentlemen say to that, to somebody who thinks that this is God punishing America for the wrong that we've been doing, for our immorality?
Well, there's a lot we might say about that. One is maybe, right? Perhaps it's hard for us to speak with definitiveness about whether or not this is a judgment directly from God. The second thing is, I would say it's not just if it's a judgment, it's not necessarily a judgment on America. There are lots of nations that are suffering from it. I think the last number I heard, and this was probably several days ago, was like 71 nations or something were having problems with coronavirus. So I don't think it's a judgment on America specifically. I think that to draw that conclusion probably thinks of America being in a unique place among the nations of the world. And I don't necessarily think, at least from a biblical perspective, America is in the same position as ancient Israel or something like that. And yet, it's very possible that this is a judgment from God. And maybe we would use the word discipline. So Hebrews chapter 12 talks about discipline coming from God. And I think in Hebrews 12, he's probably talking about things that originated with Satan and with wicked people who were persecuting God's people. And yet, there was a very real discipline that God intended by it that would sharpen and purify and hone and strengthen his people. And I think that this virus, whether it's directly from the hand of God or not, I think we can look at human decisions, human choices that have been made that have led to this outbreak. And yet we understand that God is sovereign and he's in control. And I think most importantly, he's in control in that while he might not have scripted this out, in the precise way that it's going in some kind of blueprint way, he's powerful enough that even out of this bad circumstance, he can accomplish his grand purposes, which is to call all men to repentance, and perhaps, and certainly, even if this isn't directly from the hand of God, it can still move us to repentance if we will allow it.
Absolutely. Yeah, if nothing else, it makes us think about things in a way that maybe we haven't been thinking about ways. I know personally, I think everybody's probably like this. We just get in our habits, we get in our routines, and we just live every day as if we know what tomorrow's going to hold and we know what we're going to do. And I think James talks about that. James talks about the presumption of knowing what you're going to do. And I think this is maybe a good time for us to be reminded that we don't know how everything is going to work out. He says at the end, James chapter 4, "Come now, you who say today or tomorrow we will go to such and such a city and spend a year there and engage in business and make a profit. Yet you do not know what your life will be like tomorrow. You're just a vapor that appears for a little while and then vanishes away." I think that would define probably most of our lives a week ago, that we know this is what's going to happen today, this is what's going to happen tomorrow, these are the circumstances. And I think sometimes maybe because we live in such prosperity and maybe because we do have a control over a lot of things, we miss out on the concept that we are not in control. So I would say this is one good thing that maybe comes out of this, is it reminds us that we are not in control. So today, I'm not going to get to do all of the things that I might normally do. And certainly tomorrow, when it comes to the Lord's Day, it's going to be abnormal. All of us have already experienced our schedules changing, and we're not in control. So I think that's one good thing that comes to reminder for us, is that we don't want to continue to be presumptuous about our time. Rather, as Larson, you mentioned earlier before we started recording, that we need to really take on that mentality that James said. Instead, you ought to say, if the Lord wills, we will live and also do this or that, and rather than boasting about the time that we have.
Yeah,
Well, I would just say, well, go ahead, Larson.
No, after you, Ted.
Well, all I was going to say is that as we study the Bible and we look at some of the judgments of God that have, I mean, we know for certain this was God acting, they tend to defy human judgment and expectation. I think we had an entire podcast about Habakkuk wrestling with and trying to figure out why, God, this is the way you're going to deal with this situation. You're going to use the Babylonians to judge us. They're worse than us. And so I think, God's judgments and actions tend to defy our expectations and, a lot of times our understanding. What we wrestle with maybe in thinking, so what we don't want to do is attribute any purpose to God that we can't understand by revelation, because we don't want to speak for God or presume this and then start making applications about certain people. I think, we've been studying, just kind of surveying Ecclesiastes in our Bible classes recently. And I think there's a lot of advice against that, advice against making judgments about people on a superficial level, saying, well, this is what the problem is. Look at these people. And, one of the things that Solomon says is that in chapter 5 at the end there, he says the ability to enjoy our possessions is separate from our possessions. And so we can work and we're still not even in control of, we're not even in control of the power to enjoy our blessings. And so from the standpoint of what we can control, it's almost nothing. Even when we make the best choices we can't control the outcome. And so I guess this, just tying this all up here, if we don't know specifically from God with revelation that this is God's purpose, we wouldn't want to say that. But at the same time, we don't hesitate to recognize that God is in control. And when I am reminded that I am not in control, then there's always something for me to learn from that and be reminded of. It's going to be something that forces me to depend on God and rely on Him more.
Yeah, I think we also mentioned the idea of, this causing us to slow down. It's disrupted our schedule enough where we're having to find other things to do. And Jared, you said something, I don't know if I've got this quote exactly right or not, but you made the point that you heard someone say, we're lazy for the Lord because we are busy for the world.
Yeah.
And did I get that right? Yeah. So this has caused us to be a little less busy for the world right now, at least for a lot of people. But some people may be busier. I don't know. It probably made their schedule more hectic. But for a lot of people, it disrupted their schedule enough where now we have time maybe to focus on some things that are more important that we've been neglecting.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think, one thing that ought to really be sobering to us is when Jesus tells that parable of the sower. And he mentions that there was seed that fell on the thorny ground. And I guess you could imply that there is some real immorality that's going on when you think about people seeking the pleasures of the world. That would really be a possibility. But Jesus just mentions that the thorny soil, the problem is that people got carried away with the worries and the cares of the world and seeking the pleasures of the world. And I think that might fit us in a way that maybe we're not comfortable admitting, that there are some real hindrances sometimes to our service to God and our devotion to others. And just, there are some hindrances to our faith in general because we are busy with the world, and everybody has obligations. We've got families, we've got jobs, we've got things that we want to do. And sometimes I'm afraid what we might be guilty of is just giving God what's left over. And most of us don't have much left over to give. And so if we're just giving God the leftovers, there's not much that he's going to get. And certainly I think we would agree, God is worthy of much more than just our leftovers, especially when it comes to our time and to our devotion. So I think if anything, what this maybe gives us an opportunity to do is to reset our schedules. We just need to reset our lives. And most of us are going to have a lot of free time now. And so find new things to do. You're going to have to find new things to do with your time. And so rather than just binging on Netflix or whatever else people might decide to do with their time, maybe this is a good opportunity to start some spiritual habits For you personally, maybe it's a good opportunity for you to start some spiritual habits in your lives. And so that would be a challenge that you can immediately take with what I'm going to do with this newfound free time. But then I think the real challenge is when life does go back to normal. And I think life is probably going to go back to normal, hopefully fairly soon. And when it does go back to normal, I think the tragic thing would be us just going back to things the way they were and cramming our schedules so full that we're busy from sun up to sundown. And I think it would be good if in this time we create some new spiritual habits. And then when life does get back to normal, then maintain those habits and start to say no. When you get to recreate your schedule, maybe start saying no. I think I mentioned that one thing that this is probably going to do is it's probably going to show us that we can do without some of the things that we think we just cannot live without, like sports, for instance. And I know I'm touching a sensitive button here when we talk about sports. I'm as big a fan as anybody, and I'm certainly disappointed that right now we're not getting to watch March Madness, and football season is being threatened. And those are scary things for us, right? But I think what this is going to show us is that we can get by without all of these things that we think we have to have.
So
Yeah,
let
I
me
think so.
just
Go
let me
ahead.
just make this note. I don't know if everybody who's tuning in can hear the other guys because I'm sharing this video. We will make sure we have the video uploaded after this, and the audio will be on our Prove All Things page. But I think one problem is that I'm sharing it from Facebook and not through Zoom. Jared, that might be something we need to work on if we do
Yeah.
this again. So anyway, but Lonnie, you were saying.
Yeah, so we talked about that unique circumstances create opportunities. And I think about that right now as Christians, we have opportunities maybe presented to us more abundantly than ever before as far as helping people. You know, Jesus talks about that our focus needs to be laying up treasures in heaven, and we do that by using the opportunities before us. And I think about we probably know brethren that are going to be more financial need. That may present more opportunities for us. We will know brethren that have needs for someone to take care of things that they're not able to get out and take care of, and maybe those who are at less risk are going to be able to help out in that way. We certainly have opportunities to have more influence with our family because we will probably have more time with our family. Jared, you were talking about resetting our schedules, and I was just thinking of an example. I know when my boys were younger and we had activities like sports and things going on, that just having our nightly Bible reading was a challenge during basketball season because we had games all the time. Well, right now, nobody has games going on. And so there's that opportunity to set that pattern of every night as a family, we're going to get together and read. And so it's just these type of opportunities that can come from this are great learning opportunities for us. And I, as you said, Jared, if we can maintain what we learned during this time, when and if life does return back to normal, we'll be better for it.
So in the midst of the parable of what we call the parable of the unjust steward, you guys made me think of this. Jesus says the sons of this age are more shrewd in relation to their own kind than the sons of light. And I've always kind of taken that to mean, and part of the lesson of the parable to mean that, people in the world generally know how to use the things that they have to, advance and to be okay in the world. And yet, generally Jesus seems to be saying that the sons of light struggle to make that transition from, well, now I'm going to use my time and my things to advance the cause of the Lord. I think you guys said we're lazy for the Lord because we're busy with the world. And someone might hear that and say, well, I don't think I'm lazy. I just don't know what to do. Well, this is the time to start. That is true for all of us. There are all of us who there's something that we could do better and maybe we just don't know how to do it. This is a great opportunity we've got time and opportunity to maybe turn a corner in our life, so to speak, in certain ways to where we are we're going to let go of some of these things that we've been focusing attention toward from a worldly perspective, things that may be good, okay in and of themselves, but they're distracting us from using our time and other resources for doing things for the Lord and advancing the Lord's cause and helping His people.
One thing. Yeah, go ahead, Lonnie.
Well, I was going to change subject, so if it's still on this topic.
Well, I was just going to say that we've been talking about opportunities this might create. And, we've just had a series of lessons at Quinn about evangelism and trying to establish and maintain new Christians. And it seems to me like this would be an occasion where people would be maybe looking for answers and maybe willing to listen to things about spiritual matters, recognizing that life is short, that we're not in control. Maybe this will break down a lot of pride and kind of self-assurance that people have had. And maybe we can use those opportunities to point people to Christ and be able to. So, even the atheist is having to deal with coronavirus, but only the Christian can have some hope beyond, whatever happens. Only the Christian can have hope. And I can imagine how this would be devastating for people who don't have any hope. If all your hope is in the economy, or all your hope is in the government, or all your hope is in living a long life, this kind of thing should really bring you to a consciousness of how unstable all those things are, and so the only sure thing is faith in God.
I think this should also cause us it can create in us more compassion, make us more compassionate, make us more grateful for things maybe we've been taking for granted. I know we were just talking about how assemblies and the freedom to gather together and to see each other and that type of thing, we're probably going to have a greater appreciation for that when this is over with. And so I think those are good things that can come from this as well.
Yeah, I think you're right. You mentioned compassion, and I think one thing that kind of stands out to me, and in some ways, I really hesitate to call what most of us are going through right now. I hesitate to call it a real distress. Obviously, we have been inconvenienced, and we're not able to get out and do some of the things that we want to be able to do. But I'm going to be isolated today in my home with plenty of food. And I've got internet access. I've got access to all kinds of entertainment. And so the thing is that I'm not really all that distressed. And I don't know about you guys. I'm getting a lot of emails from the power company or from the insurance company. And if you're struggling right now to pay your premiums or to pay your bill, they're going to be lenient. And I think that's a great thing. I'm not trying to minimize the economic effect that this is going to have on many people. Maybe a lot of people maybe find themselves out of work and they're going to miss a paycheck. And I know if my family was to miss a paycheck, that would be a major thing for us. I think the government is probably working to try to make sure that there's some extra money that finds its way into citizens' hands so that the distress will be lessened as much as possible. And I think those are great things. The problem is this doesn't really make us feel the full brunt of what it's like to live in real depressing circumstances or real distressing circumstances. And I'm not saying that I want to live under terrible circumstances, but what I am saying is that I know some people that live in other countries, that live in third world countries, and I don't know that the coronavirus is really going to affect them at all, because today's just Saturday to them. They're not missing out on normal things that we're missing out on because they don't even have those luxuries anyway. If their economy crashes, they're not going to feel the effect of that. It's irrelevant to them because they don't have any money anyway, and they don't have the ability to get jobs anyway. And so all of these things that we think are really distressing to us, man, these are just luxuries that are kind of being we're kind of being inconvenienced with the missing our luxuries. But I will tell you, maybe this will open our eyes and help us to be compassionate in some degree, that we start thinking that there are real people living all around this world every day, and they are dealing with real stresses. Where's my next meal going to come from? How am I going to buy milk and diapers for my baby? Those are very real things. So if this slows us down a little bit and opens up our eyes and makes us think about other distresses, then maybe that would be a good thing. All right, gentlemen, any other thoughts? Let's wrap this up. Again, we could have talked a lot about the negative impacts of the coronavirus. I think everybody knows what's going on negatively, but we just wanted to get together this morning. For those of you who are listening online, we're having some technical difficulties. This is a new thing for us. We normally would be sitting around a table together recording this, but because we're trying to do our part to flatten the curve, we have decided that we're going to do this remotely, and technology is a good thing, but sometimes it baffles us a little bit too. So anyway, Larson, for the people that are listening online, why don't you kind of wrap this up and explain to people? We'll have this recorded where everybody can listen to it in its entirety soon, because I think you're the only person that people online can hear.
Yeah, so we're sharing this live right now, but because of the way that we did it, because we are trying to figure out what we're doing too, I think I think you can only hear my audio, which I'm really sorry about that. But it would be better if you could only hear somebody else. But I think what we're going to do is we're going to share this video to our Prove All Things page in just a little while. And then we'll have the audio uploaded onto the Prove All Things Podbean website as well. And so, if you've been able to just see that there was a discussion happening, you'll be able to hear the whole discussion, Lord willing, in just a little while. But thank you for listening, and we are going to log off of the live now, and we will try to get something back up so you can hear the whole discussion in just a little while. Thanks for listening.
Thanks for listening to Prove All Things. To suggest a topic, raise a question, or offer a comment, write to proveallthings@mail.com.